Welcome to Shooting Straight with A1F.com. I'm Frank Miniter with the NRA's America's First Freedom. Today we have the incredible pleasure of speaking with Johnny Joey Jones, who no doubt you know from Fox News. I'm a huge fan personally with all your appearances on Fox, Johnny. But you also just came out with a book, or are coming out with a book, Unbroken Bonds of Battle. Now, I'm only halfway through this book, but I'm already all in, Johnny. It's such an honest and authentic tale. It reminds me of Phil Caputo's Rumor of War, that classic Vietnam era book that just tells a true story of an officer in the Marine Corps fighting in that war. Your experiences in Afghanistan and otherwise serving this country, you bring that story to life, and you bring other people's stories to life. I'm wondering, how did you begin as a gun owner? Did you grow up shooting? Did you bring that basis into the military?
Yeah, when you read the book, you see that football and hunting are interwoven into pretty much every relationship that was important to me that made it into the book. And so the first few chapters of Danny Ridgway, Greg Obluski, and Amos Benjamin, those are my three closest hunting friends, but they're also three of my closest friends from the Marine Corps. And to be honest with you, our hunting life and our gun life kind of happened after our Marine Corps life. As you know, being stationed in places like California, Hawaii, Japan, having the guns I own there, finding ways to hunt there, all that got put on the back burner. But thankfully, kind of having that Marine Corps life in front of me satisfied a lot of that. I mean, I had a gun in my hand all the time. And so for me, I really became a knowledgeable Second Amendment activist. In other words, using my Second Amendment in my life after the Marine Corps. But it was my experience and friendships in the Marine Corps that opened those doors for me. I grew up in rural Georgia, and you see that in the book. And my dad was a gun owner, but he had 3 or 4 guns he used for hunting, and he didn't understand guns as a hobby because for him it was work all the time and there were no hobbies. And so it was really neat to have friends in the Marine Corps that opened those doors and pockets of knowledge for me to learn. In our relationships, as you read in the book, we went through the worst of things together. Amos lost his brother. Danny Ridgway lost his teammate. Greg Obluski lost multiple Marines under his command. And now when we go on our hunting trips together or we go to the range together, it's just a way to kind of focus and enjoy the world that God made for us, not just this concrete jungle we live in, and reconnect and just be thankful to be alive.
That positive, I see this, the guns behind you, that positive part, or that is the American gun culture that brings people up. I grew up as a hunter as well. As you grow up that way with that familiarity with guns as tools, I've always seen them as tools. I can relate to your father in that regard. They're also works of art, but they're just wonderful tools for our freedom, but for hunting and for self-defense. So as you entered the military, was that the first time then that you'd used that platform, or had you shot AR-15s before?
I'd never shot an AR-15, quite honestly. You go back 2003 and 4. Up until that point, there was a ban for a large part of that time. Before that, when I was growing up, and then even after that, they were kind of looked at as guns that were more expensive than we could afford. We had a $200 or $300 Remington. I mean, my dad used a Woods Master that some people would call a Jam Master, although his is never jammed. And so guns for us were exactly that. They were a tool. And shooting a 30-06 with a metal butt plate, growing up, getting a hold of an AR-15 or, our version of it, the carbine, was like, really, this is what we're going to war with? But it was effective and it worked. And it really opened my eyes to really the difference between the ignorance and fear of guns and the knowledge and command of guns. I mean, ultimately, why are guns so important? Because they are something that in and of themselves represent power. But that power is responsibility. And for other people, that power is fear. But for those that are knowledgeable and who take the time to learn and be proficient, having that much power and responsibility for every law-abiding civilian in this country reminds me why it was so necessary to fight so hard for this country and its freedom. To me, those two things connect, interwoven like a jigsaw puzzle. What is a free country if not a country to where every citizen has the power to defend themselves and defend what is theirs? And so, are guns a tool? Absolutely. Are they also a weapon? Sure they are, but there's a necessity for that weapon. And that's what makes serving this country and now being a law-abiding rights exercising citizen connects so easily for me.
Well, I like that you said individual power. Of course, the Second Amendment protects an individual right to bear arms, but that power, that if you take that power away from the people, the bad guy who comes to the door may be bigger, maybe stronger, or may have some kind of weapon, will be more powerful than that homeowner if they've been disarmed. And then that homeowner then potentially becomes a victim until the police can arrive, till heroes can get there. So it's individual empowerment and empowerment of our population. And unfortunately, that some segment of our population wants to take away.
Yeah, listen, at the end of the day, I am a very outspoken and largely recognized Second Amendment advocate. But before I even get there, I'm just a proud American. I'm so proud to be from this country, to grow up in rural Georgia. I have friends that grew up in inner cities, and you know what? As they went into the military and learned what the rest of the country provides and offers, they respected where they came from, but they also learned what else is out there. I think a large part of our political divide simply comes to the density of our population in certain areas. For others, I have more cows than people for neighbors. Guns are not only an important tool, they're a necessary tool. I've got animals on the farm. I need to be able to protect them. I live out in a rural area. Nobody's getting here in time if something bad happens. I need to be able to protect my family. I also have a lot of room and can legally and safely use my guns for target practice. And so I chose the lifestyle I have, and I put work and effort into it. After going out and seeing this entire country from Hawaii to Alaska to California, I work in New York and I live in Georgia, and I've seen everywhere in between with our Fox Nation Outdoors hunting show. I love this country for what it is and the uniqueness of the individual places. When we got ready to write this book, I wanted to make sure some of that was told. So I brought people in from all of those unique places. And the one thing we all had in common, and the one thing you read throughout the book, is whether it's hunting or college football or deployment or going through the troubles with your parents that maybe weren't the parent you need them to be, but tried to be, whatever those struggles are that are consistent in the book, you learn that it doesn't matter where you're from. If you're an American and just a good human being, you respect certain things equally. You respect others. You give them the dignity that they deserve. You also respect your own conviction, and you respect this country. And so I don't know if everyone in the book is a gun owner, but I guarantee you everyone in the book appreciates and respects the Second Amendment, because you don't go through serving this country, losing life in serving this country, losing limb in serving this country, and not gain a different perspective and respect for what this country means. And all of those rights are a part of it. And that's what makes this book so important to an audience like an NRA audience.
Well, in this book, you talk a lot about a band of brothers.
Yeah.
Specifically, you mostly talk about the Marine Corps, but this band of brothers and this shared ethos, fighting for American liberty, fighting for our freedom overseas in this case. But I worry as I hear that and I read in this book and this beautiful, authentic voice that you bring to it. I worry that American society in general, there's a war from the left on our history, on American history, on our civil liberties, such as the Second Amendment, and to the extent where they're tearing down historical figures, they're tearing down historical ideas, and they're tearing down this shared idea of what individual liberty is. I'm wondering if you see that. If you do, what can we do about it?
What you can do about it is raise your kids. I mean, that's the number one thing we can do about anything that's bothering us right now is raise your kids. I had the chance to host a primetime hour of Fox News Channel last week or a few weeks ago, and I got 4 monologues. I had 4 opportunities that in 10 minutes to say what was most important to me. One of those 4 was to talk directly to fathers and tell dads specifically, the masculine person in a child's life, raise your kids. I'm not telling you how to do it, but do it. And show your kids as the masculine figure in the household how important it is to not just have aggression, but regulate it. How important it is to have, the opportunity, boy or girl, to find your power and then regulate that and understand you don't need to impose your will on somebody else. You need to respect them, but also stand up for yourself. So much of our next generation is insecure, and they're insecure because of social media. They're insecure because they've never had more eyes on them. They've never had more other people to compare themselves against. And they've never had less opportunity to prove themselves because we care so much about safe space and safe sport and safe this and safe that. You can't prove yourself to yourself if you don't go out and, as Dr. Jordan Peterson says, do dangerous things carefully. And parents, the ones that are parents, are scared to death for their kids in the wrong ways. I'm scared to death that my kids don't get challenged enough. I'm scared that my kids don't quite get, bumps and bruised enough to know how resilient they are. And so raise your kids and raise them to know their own power. And the more secure you are in your power, the less you feel the need to exercise it in inappropriate ways. And I think that handles so much of the political. So much of that political is built on, and that partisanship and that woke or whatever you call it is built on an adult's insecurity. And so how do we combat against that? Those bad ideas don't stand a chance when children grow up to be young adults that are secure in who they are, who have been tested and know what their capabilities are and what their ceiling is and know what they can achieve. Those types of human beings don't sit around worrying about how you offended them. Those types of human beings go out and prove it, even if it's not what I believe in. If they're secure, I think they'll do it in a way that is respecting of our Constitution and individual liberties, and I think that's the path forward.
Well, I have a 10-year-old son, and I tell him, let's go have an adventure. And what I'll do is I'll poke him in the forehead and say, but use this first. This is the muscle you use first. Wisdom. You think about it, and then we could do some really cool stuff. And he just thinks that's awesome. I agree with you. I think there are too many fatherless homes in this country, or homes with fathers that just aren't there enough. They aren't doing this enough, raising their kids with that integrity, that honor, that's a deep philosophy, really, of manliness that lets them grow up right. There's too much in our society that's attacking that idea. But I worry, though, as I look at like the Department of Defense. We've recently reported on a report, as a panel report, as a paper on suicides in the armed forces and among the rest of that community. And how do they combat that? And one of the ways this report, the panelists on this report cite as a way to fight suicide, is with massive disarmament of taking away private arms of our service members and our contractors that work for the U.S. military. And I'm wondering if you saw that when you were on bases, and what was the gun culture you saw there?
The vast majority of service members on base live in barracks and don't have access to firearms unless they go to an armory and check them out. I don't know that I remember living in a state that would allow you to possess a firearm easily. I lived in California and Hawaii and overseas in Japan, so that was never really a thought until I lived in Florida and had a house out in town. But I'll tell you this, I mean, that's like saying, hey, in order to stop DUIs, let's get rid of all the cars, or let's just keep people off the roads. They can own cars, but they can't drive them on the roads. The idea that you're going to stop suicide by taking away guns, as if there aren't still a million other ways to take your own life that are just about as quick and easy, rather than focusing on the fact of what is it about serving in today's military, or what is it that you're exposed to, or what is it about the entire psychological epidemic that's affecting our society and acutely affecting our military. What is it that makes you want to commit suicide? Why in the world would you want to change the narrative of suicide to the tool other than to excuse yourself for your complicity in it? If men and women living on military bases are wanting to commit suicide, it's not because they simply have access to a gun. It's because they have felt that their life has dwindled to such a low quality that continuing to live it, even for those others that care for them, isn't worth it. And the complicity that military installation or even military service has in that's the scandal, that's the difficulty, and that's what needs to be looked at. It's a scapegoat to pivot that to any tool used to take your own life. The idea that simply taking away guns would change the psychological state of men and women in our military for the better. You take away the gun, that person doesn't commit suicide today, but they're still not empty of suicidal ideation. So now they go jump off a bridge instead. What did you do differently? How did you stop them from wanting to kill themselves? It's a dishonest argument, and quite honestly, it's a dishonorable argument.
Yeah, if you look internationally, you find like Asian countries, for example, Korea, have much higher suicide rates than the United States, yet they have very strict gun control laws. It just doesn't seem to make any scientific sense either. Now, I helped a Green Beret, a former Green Beret, retired Green Beret, with a book called Conquer Anything. And one of his big arguments, he was wounded badly in Afghanistan and spent a year in a recovery hospital in San Antonio, Texas, in a burn unit recovering. And one of his big points was that I volunteered, he said, to serve. And by volunteering, as I'm a volunteer, I can't be a victim. Volunteers by dictionary definition cannot be victims. And so he didn't like being treated as a victim, and he didn't like other service members who had served being treated as if they were victims. They might be heroes or not, but they're certainly not victims of what they've done. And he felt that treating them as victims kind of wore away part of their self-identity and who they were, and pushed them into the more of a negative viewpoint rather than a positive viewpoint of healing and recovering. Now, you've served, and you gave, in fact, you gave your legs. You gave so much to this great country and our freedom. Do you agree with them on that? Where do you see it?
I think it's certainly a viewpoint that's helpful. What we're talking about right now is emotional intelligence. And so on one side of this is, can you paint the picture to best suit what is healthy for you? And that would be, well, I'm not a victim, and therefore I'm okay with what happened to me because I volunteered to do it. The other half of that is, what if you are a victim? What does that matter? We're all victims. We all go through adversity. A fair is where you give a blue ribbon to a pig. It's not life. Life's not fair. I don't know if we were told the truth about the Iraq War. I don't know if we were told the truth about why we were in Afghanistan for 20 years. I have more questions than answers on both of those topics. So am I a victim from politicians lying? Am I a victim from bad policy? Am I a victim from even honest politicians making terrible decisions? Am I a victim from a military industrial complex that made billions of dollars off my blood and others? Maybe. How much does that matter for me coming to terms with the fact that I went to war, was blown up, and have a chance to come home and live the rest of my life as happy as I can possibly make it? How much does the fact that something bad happened to me out of my control get to dictate if I have fun today and experience joy tomorrow? The difference is accepting all the factors in your life and still deciding it's worth being happy, as opposed to looking at those factors in a way that will make you happy. I don't care which one you choose. If happiness is your end goal and you're working for it, you're probably not sitting there giving up on stuff. What happens to those who aren't happy and who are frustrated is they're just looking for answers for questions that aren't worth asking anymore. Why did this happen to me? Could I have done something differently? Am I still the same person? Do I still bring value? Those aren't questions worth asking. Those questions are already answered. And in finding the answer to those questions, in other words, do I still bring value? Well, you do if you want to. You do if you choose to. You do if you go find it. You don't if you don't. But none of that's dictated by you have an injury or you went to war. Those things are dictated by what you do today and tomorrow, not what you did yesterday. Why did this happen to me? That's not a question worth trying to answer. There's a mom and a dad right now who lost a child in a car wreck that are asking, why did this happen to me? They're a victim, but they don't have to live as a victim. They can live in honor of that child. We can live in honor of our sacrifice. We can live in honor of the men and women that died beside us that didn't get to come home. Or we can die in their memory. And which one do you think they would want?
Well, that's the positive point of view. I see you so often from you on Fox News and from your book, Unbroken Bonds of Battle. So I'm guessing as you go forward and you look at America, you travel a lot, you must be hopeful about America's future despite some of the things we're now dealing with.
Listen, my grandparents were alive during a time where this country didn't view itself as a superpower. That was an unanswered question. My grandparents were alive during a time where if you had scrap metal, you went to turn it in for a war effort. My parents were alive during a time, my grandparents were alive. They were born during a time where nobody had any food for about 4 years. They were alive during a time where they were so poor that the Great Depression wasn't felt because they were already there. They were born in the teens and 20s. And so I understand that there are people alive right now who have had worse unanswered questions than we have. Our problem right now is, are we so spoiled that we're going to let the whims of a certain class of people, call it woke or what have you, dictate what products we buy when we have 1,000 to choose from? That's a heck of a problem to have. I don't consider it positive. I consider it realistic. The truth is, our next war may be with China or it may be within ourselves. But we get to decide that. They don't get to decide that. 50, 60, 70 years ago, Japan was dropping bombs on Pearl Harbor. Almost 80 years ago, I guess longer than that, 70, 80 years ago, 80 years ago, almost to the day, we had our 14 to 30-year-old men storming the beaches of Normandy. We know what it's like to go through really tough times and not know if we're going to make it through. Right now, we're going through a class of people pitching a fit, and we just need to wait for it to be over. That's what I think.
That's the positive attitude I found in your great book, which I urge everyone to buy. And then I always find from you, it's a pleasure to speak to you. Where can people follow you, find out more about you?
Yeah, if you tune in to Fox News Channel, chances are at some point during the day I'll be filling in hosting for somebody. Outside of that, if you just want to see my hourly thoughts, you can follow me on Twitter at Johnny_Joey, and then the exact same handle on Instagram if you want to see pictures of what I'm up to at Johnny_Joey. And most importantly, if you go to FoxNewsBooks.com, you can buy this book, Unbroken Bonds of Battle. And there's where you'll get a longer narrative of who I am and what I think and how I got here. I talk as much about my daddy as I do my best friends in there because those people collectively made whatever version of me exists today. And I'm very proud for it. I'm proud to have had those influences, those relationships. You learn about people like Lacey Gano from West Virginia who didn't believe he could learn to read or write. Now he teaches other people how to fly big airplanes. And just so much of this story in this book are individuals that overcame adversity that a lot of Americans are sitting there looking at. And if somebody can do it, joining the military, you can do it, just in your life. There's a lot of parallels there. And I couldn't be more proud of this book.
Thank you, Johnny.
Yes, sir. Thank you.